So we're looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 3, and we are specifically looking at verse 13 says, okay, each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it. That's interesting. See, the translators are helping you with capitalizing the day, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. Now, let's go back. Let's go back and look at the entire context here, okay? Let's actually read from chapter 3, verse 1. But I, brothers, could not address you as a spiritual people. He's telling, notice this, guys. These are, and I love stuff like this. Brothers, or brothers and sisters, family members, meaning that Christians, says could not address you as a spiritual people. He's saying, even though they're brothers and sisters in the faith, he says, you guys are not acting spiritually. He says, rather, I'm going to refer to you guys as people of the flesh. If anybody is confused over whether Christians can live worldly lives, here's a good passage to prove and show that you can be a believer in Christ, still act fleshly. And then he says, I will refer to you as people of the flesh, as infants in Christ, which means infants in Christ tend to be very fleshly. Infants in Christ are actually not spiritually mature. They are more worldly than not. Now that's not, but we're following the train of thought here. He says, I fed you with milk. Again, that goes to being an infant. Not solid food, obviously, because they're infants. For you are not ready for it. And even now you are not ready. Even now, currently, you are not ready. So you should be ready maybe, but you're not ready is what he's saying. For you are still of the flesh. You're still fleshly. You're still worldly. For a while, there is jealousy and strife among you. How does he know they're worldly, by the way? How does he know that these folks in Corinth are worldly? Because there is jealousy, there is strife. See that? Are you not of the flesh? I'm putting these red ones because these are the things like that stand out and should pay attention to. And behaving only in a human way, which means you're fleshly, you're unspiritual, so on and so forth. For when a person says, he says, I follow Paul, and another, I follow Apollos, are you not being merely human? Jealousy and strife, division, right? Are you not being merely human when somebody says, oh, I'm following Paul, and somebody's saying, oh, I'm following Apollos? Does that not make you just a mere human, unspiritual, fleshly, worldly, ungodly? Then he asks rhetorical questions. He says, what then is Apollos? What is Paul? And then he answers it. Servants through whom you believed. He says, that's all we are. That's all I am. Paul is talking about himself. That's all Apollos is. We are mere servants, right? We're serving Christ. We're serving God. And it's through us, right, you believed. Servants through whom you believed as the Lord assigned to each. He says, I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So here, this should be yelling to you that God gets the glory because he's the one that made it grow. Paul did his part. Apollos did his part. God made it grow. So neither he who plants, Paul, nor he who waters, Apollos, is anything. We are nothing. Guys, I wish that those of us who are in ministry of various sorts, whether it's pastoral ministry, whether it's apologetic sort of stuff, whatever sort of ministry, missionaries, I really wish that we all saw ourselves as Paul saw himself. If you're planting or you're watering, you are, right? So neither he who plants nor he waters is anything. We are not anything. I am not anything. I should have, personally me, a very balanced view of myself that I'm not much. Even if the Lord uses me to do great things, it is ultimately God. But only God who gives the growth. He who plants, Paul, he who waters, Apollos, are one. They're a part of the same job. They're a part of the same work. It is all work being done for the growth of the individuals in question. And each will receive, each who, Paul and Apollos, each will receive his wages according to his labor. So whether it's Paul or Apollos, whomever it is, will receive this to according to their label. Because he says for. Every time you see for in the Bible, you want to ask, what is it there for? It's purpose, right? It's an explanation. For, because we, Paul and Apollos, are God's fellow workers. How cool is that, guys? We are God's fellow workers. We work with God. It's amazing. And he says, you, the people that have come to know Jesus through them, are God's field, God's building. Now, these are the two things that are very important here, because he's going to go on to speak about it. Field, God's field, planting, growing, so on and so forth. Also God's building. He uses building language. So he's using both agricultural language, and then he's also using construction language, right? Buildings. According to the grace of God given to me, like a skilled master builder. So he went from being a planter in verses 1 to 9 to being a master builder. He changes the lingo here. So earlier he said, I planted, Apollos watered. Now he's saying, God, by God's grace given to me, like a skilled master builder, I laid a foundation, which is exactly the same thing as planting. And someone else, Apollos, is building upon it, right? So I laid a foundation, he's building upon it. I planted, he watered. That's the language. Let each one, and each one here references Paul and Apollos, again, contextually speaking, but it could be people who are in ministry, so on and so forth. Let each one take care or watch out or be careful is the idea here, how he builds upon it. We've laid the foundation, and let people be careful as to how. So this is a warning passage that would go to like people who are in ministry, people who you watch on YouTube, right? People who need to be very, very careful as to what they are doing. Does that make sense? Let people take care how they build upon it. The foundation's been laid. We are to be careful how we build upon this foundation, because no one can lay a foundation other than the one which is laid. The foundation being the gospel here, by the way, which is Jesus Christ, right? So this is, the foundation is Jesus. No one can lay a new foundation. That's it. But you can build upon that foundation incorrectly. There's an idea here that at the very least is presented. So foundation. Now, if anyone builds on the foundation with gold or silver or precious stones, wood, hay, straw, he's giving all of these things, gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, or straw. These are all examples of what you can build with on a foundation, on any foundation. This is coming down to the explanation of the actual text that the question was about, that we were asked about by Vicente. Whatever the building is, the foundation is there. It's Jesus. Whatever the building is, he says, whether it's gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, or straw, each one's work will become manifest. Each one's work, the building on the foundation, will become known. He says, manifest. When will they become known? For the day will disclose it. What day? Well, the day of the Lord. Everybody gets this. The idea here is that when everything is said and done, on Judgment Day, everybody's work will be revealed. Whether we built with materials that will last or that will, I'm getting ahead of myself. Just hang on a second. For the day will disclose it because it will be revealed by fire. So the question is to ask, what does fire do? Well, fire burns, right? Fire destroys. There's that concept. But fire also purifies. Fire also has the ability to bringing out the purity of gold, for example, right? It gets past all of these non-essential things, right? And then brings to the surface thing that is most important. And the fire will test the sort of work each one has done. So, okay, let's take this back. What is the work each one has done? Well, Paul planted and he laid the foundation. Apollos watered or built on the foundation. Or it could be beyond Paul and Apollos. People who have generally planted and then other people who've built on that ministry, who've built upon that foundation. What he's saying is the day will come on the day of judgment. The day is what his reference is, when fire will reveal it, or will show whether it's the real deal or it's not. Everyone's work, he says, it will test the sort of work each one has done, because that fire will disclose it, will manifest it, will make it known. If it's, let's just think about it this way. If it's built with stone and gold and silver, it will not burn down. Those things don't get burnt down by fire. But if it's built with wood or hay or straw, it will burn down. Those are weak substances, so it will just disappear. He says, and he goes on to say that if the work that anyone has built on the foundation survives, stones, so on and so forth, he will receive a reward. So God will reward whether Paul or Apollos for building or planting or building on this foundation, for doing all this work. If it's solid, if it's good, then he will receive a reward, whatever that is. If anyone's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved. This is interesting. What he's saying is the work he's done might be proven to be kind of weak. The ministry the individual did, the walls and to the building or X, Y, and Z, the watering of the plant, could possibly be weak and bad. There's many people who are Christians. There are many people who have been Christians throughout history, legitimate believers, who've done work for the Lord. They've just done it in a very weak sense. And the day of the Lord will reveal that, whether that was solid work that was done, it was a good building that was built, or it was not, but it will only be, but only through fire. So fire here is used both as a destructive force and also a purifying force. But the individual, he says, he will be saved. The individual is a Christian, but the work he does, and I think there are many people, by the way, who are Christians, and the work they've done, the quote unquote ministry they've done, will be burnt up because it's just really, really weak work. They haven't built with solid materials on the solid foundation that is Jesus. Just because somebody calls something they do a ministry, just because somebody is doing ministry, doesn't mean they're doing it right. And for those of us who are actually doing this, we should have the humility to sit there and say, I need to reconsider this. I think Paul does this. He says this in Galatians, where he says, I went back to Jerusalem to make sure that the race that I was running, or the work, that labor that I had done, that I hadn't done it in vain amongst the Gentiles, that I was preaching the correct gospel. After like 13, 14 years of doing ministry, Paul goes back to Jerusalem to make sure that the work that he was doing amongst the Gentiles was the real deal. It was the correct gospel. How many preachers, how many folks in ministry say things like this? Like, oh, I've been doing ministry for 12 years. Let me make sure that I haven't been doing this work in vain. Let me make sure that I'm preaching the authentic gospel of Jesus. Do you not know that you are God's temple? So on and so forth. But specifically the work, the things that is talking about here has to do with the work that people are doing, right? Because earlier on he talks about you are infants, you are fleshly, you are human, and you guys are talking about division, Paul and Apollos, and that's very human. He says, Paul and Apollos are just servants through whom you believed. We just served you, and I planted and Apollos watered. This is the work that we did. So I hope that helps.